So last week, there was a moment, I think this was on Wednesday evening. There's a moment that really blew up and got everybody in the political world talking, because the implications of this are pretty scary. Trump was doing a press conference, and he was asked if, he will abide by a peaceful transition of power. Here's his response.
Win, lose, or draw in this election, will you commit here today for a peaceful transfer of power after the election? And there has been rioting in Louisville. There's been rioting in many cities across this country, red and your so-called red and blue states. Will you commit to making sure that there is a peaceful transferal of power after the election?
Well, we're going to have to see what happens. You know that I've been complaining very strongly about the ballots, and the ballots are a disaster.
I understand that, but people are rioting. Do you commit to making sure that there's a peaceful transferal of power?
We want to get rid of the ballots, and we'll have a very peaceful. There won't be a transfer, frankly. There'll be a continuation. The ballots are out of control. You know it. And you know who knows it better than anybody else? The Democrats know it better than anybody else. Go ahead.
Mr. President, the second question is, will you...
Please, go ahead.
Why won't
you asked the question.
Why won't you...
So, surprisingly, I've seen all sorts of reaction to this. I would say most of the reaction has been like, holy crap, this is a big deal. The president is not saying, yeah, of course, I'm for a peaceful transition of power. But I have seen some people argue the opposite, argue like, oh, this is another one of those moments where the media is always stuck in hair on fire mode when it comes to Trump, and this is yet another thing that they're losing their minds over. But in reality, nothing different is going to happen. If he loses, he's going to get out of there. This is another argument that I've seen people make. So what's my take on it? Honestly, I agree much more with the people who are like, this is a bad sign. This is not good. It's not. So the way you're supposed to answer, the way any president would answer when asked about a peaceful transition of power, they would say, of course, that's a hallmark of American democracy. If I win, I'm staying. If I lose, I'm going. Of course. This is the way it works. That's how any president would answer prior to Trump, Democrat or Republican. Even Republicans I hate. Even the Republicans I hate, they'd be like, of course. It's not a question. It's obvious. But he doesn't answer like that. He says, we're going to see what happens. The ballots, there's problems with the ballots. And let me just tell you, get rid of the ballots and there won't be a transition. There will be a continuation of power. So, guys, every day he reminds us and he tells us and he puts it front and center that mail-in ballots are fraudulent, mail-in ballots are fraudulent, mail-in ballots are fraudulent. All these sketchy, questionable things happening. Basically, he's trying to say, I think Sleepy Joe is already stealing it. I think he's stealing it. So he's almost letting you know he will contest it if he loses. He's letting you know that. We're just used to him blabbering about this daily, so I guess people have gotten a thick skin to it and they're a little bit numb to it. But yeah, he's letting you know, like, no, I'm not going to... He's going to casually and peacefully concede on election night if he loses, or when we finally get the results, he's going to be like, you know what, fair is fair. No, he's already been setting it up every day. Every day he's been setting it up. Oh, mail-in ballots are fraudulent. Mail-in ballots are fraudulent. Get rid of the mail-in ballots, and then there won't be a transition. There'll be a continuation. And he always does the thing where he argues like, I'm up. I've seen polls where I'm up. Nonsense. I mean, it's not true. All the polls have Biden up. Some of them more or less. But it's not true that Trump is up, but he's been setting the table like, of course I'd win if it wasn't for this fraudulent stuff going on. So do I think this is a big deal? I do. Now, the details are where nobody knows what's going to happen, and people are lying to you if they tell you they know what's going to happen. One scenario is that, yeah, he put aside the scenarios where he potentially wins for a second, because obviously he'll be happy with that, and But let's say he loses and he kind of raises a big stink about it, which is expected. But it's possible he's all bark and no bite in that he oftentimes says stuff and doesn't follow through with it. Just like he did with Afghanistan. Like 2 years ago now, he tweeted like, we're getting out of Afghanistan, it's going to be wonderful, it's going to be great. And he just didn't get out of Afghanistan. So this is a common thing with Trump where like, he'll say things and then there's just no follow through at all. So it's possible he like raises a big stink about it, but as he's raising a big stink, he's being like, you know, pushed out of the Oval Office by people at the White House or the generals or whatever. Like, okay, you could say whatever you want to say, but you're done here, son. That's possible. But a real fear is his people. Like, if Trump sends the signal, and he very likely will if he loses, how many Kyle Rittenhouses are there out there? I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot of people who, on the right, who would argue that the election is completely illegitimate. And then you have 30% or 40% of the country that's like, yeah, I don't buy it, and I think Biden is doing a coup. And then what happens? Do you get like this massive spike in domestic terrorism where you got these right-wing people attacking, you know, whatever it might be, left-wingers or government buildings, or like the consequences of his actions, like they're going to be consequences, and he either doesn't know or doesn't care, or he's okay with that. And it's like, I could see that happening. Like, I could see him being all bark and no bite. So, like, if he loses, he will be, like, forced out. But the fact that he's raising a stink about it means his people are just not going to accept the legitimacy of the election. And then we're in hell, because who knows what else happens. Like, I think the least likely scenario is that he, like, casually accepts the results and he steps down. I think it is probably a likely scenario that he raises a stink about it, but he still is out of there. And, you know, I think the scenario that most people, like the Democratic partisans, they most fear, he raises a stink about losing and he literally just doesn't leave, and you have what is effectively a coup. I think that's the thing people are very, very fearful of. Listen, I don't have all the answers. I don't know. All I know is what he said to this point and what his intention is. His intention, for sure, is going to be, I'm going to deny the legitimacy of the election, guaranteed, if I lose. Like, he's made that crystal clear. The question is, how does it unfold from there? And I don't have answers. All I have is the same kind of sentiment and emotion that everybody else has, which is just, like, we're on shaky ground, man. Things are really out of the ordinary. All of 2020 has been a colossal mess and one crisis after another. But yeah, this is definitely another crisis. And the people who I vehemently disagree with the most are the people who are acting like all this concern is just another nonsense boy who cried wolf type scandal regarding Trump. Like, there are people who think this is just like all the other things that the media screamed about and nothing came to pass. I don't know, man. When you have a president signaling very clearly he simply like will not accept the results if he loses, I do think that's a big deal. Because here's what I can guarantee you. No matter what happens, it's going to be messy. Even in a scenario where Trump is up on election night and Trump wins when all the votes are counted, even in that scenario, it's going to be messy. It's going to be messy if Biden is up big on election night and if Biden wins when all the votes are counted. That's going to be messy too. Those will be the least messy ones, but they'll still be messy. What's crazy is that a possible scenario, a likely scenario, is it looks like Trump is up on election night, but since more Democrats do mail-in voting when all the mail-in votes are counted, Biden can win comfortably. So it could look like Trump is winning on election night, but Biden can win comfortably when all the votes are counted. Experts call this the red mirage. And if that happens, and again, it's a likely scenario, oh my God, guys. I just really do feel like we're in a uniquely terrible situation. Nothing is normal. Nothing is stable. It's tough. It's really tough. All we can do is hope that everything goes smoothly, even though that's very naive at this point.